We're moving on to our next unit today, and that next unit is interactive media, right? So we've covered print, we've covered audio media, we've covered video, visual media, and now we can move on to the stuff that you live in every damn day, and that's interactive media. And we're going to take a little bit of a different approach than we have been so far. With the other units we've covered so far, we've been looking at a timeline of the history. Interactive media is so new. I mean, honestly, the internet wasn't released to the public until 1991, right? So it's so new. If we go through a timeline, it's really just going to be not as beneficial as looking at it in a different way. So we're going to look at interactive media as more of a kind of a, like, what are the basics of interactive media rather than what are the major events that happened in history in interactive media. I also do it this way because updating this every semester would drive me insane. Because interactive media changes on a daily basis. I mean, there's massive movements that occur on a weekly basis in interactive media, and there's just no way it could possibly keep the information timely and topical without just looking stupid. So instead, we're going to take a different approach, and we're going to look at kind of a more of a concepts of interactive media that are important for you to know, both as a media student and as a very, very, very engaged media consumer. And we begin by just, what are we talking about? When we say interactive media, what exactly are we dealing with here? Well, the first standard of interactivity is that it's a dialogue that occurs between a human and a computer program. So that's number one to realize, is that when we're talking about interactive media, we're talking about you, a human being, interacting with a computer program. Now, when you think about interactive media, right, think about like social media, right? Like YouTube, right? YouTube's a perfect example for this case. You're not interacting with another person. You're interacting with a program. Even when you're engaging in a conversation, you're not really interacting with that other person. You're interacting with a program, which is then interacting with the other person. It's what we call mediated communication, right? Because I can, sit here and text or, send a Snapchat to my kid, but the fact that I'm doing it through an interactive media program changes the communication style than if I was doing it face-to-face, right? Speaking to my child in person is fundamentally different than speaking to my child through social media apps, because it requires me to go through this third party, right? It requires me to mediate that interaction. Second, interactivity is a dialogue that occurs simultaneously or nearly so, right? Simultaneously or nearly so. Again, I post something on YouTube, it's available immediately, right? People can start commenting on it immediately, or at the very least, when they see it. Right? There's no delay between their engagement and their ability to interact. So it's a dialogue that can occur simultaneously or nearly so. And third, the audience has some measure of control over what media content it sees and in what order. Just ask yourself this question, because, having conversations on Zoom is awkward as all fuck, but ask yourself this question. When you're using social media, do you have control over what content you see and in what order? Kinda, right? Kinda. You curate your Twitter feed. You curate your friends list. You curate who you follow on Instagram. You curate what you follow on TikTok. So yeah, you do have some measure of control over what media content you see. You don't have a significant amount of control about what order you see it in. You do have some, but it's very indirect, right? It's one of the things I always think is funny is when people complain about ads they get on their social media feed. They're like, oh, why am I getting ads for boner pills? Well, those those ads are based upon your search history and your usage of computer media and your usage of your browser history. So that's where you're getting the ads for boner pills. Why do I always see, posts from these people, but I never see posts from these other people? Well, because of the engagement algorithm, because you don't engage with some posts. You engage with the more you engage with a account, the more likely you are to see that account in your feed, right? Because the program is saying, oh, okay, this is what you like. We're going to give you more of what you like. So you do have control about what order you see things in and what comes up, but it's not nearly as direct as we tend to think. We tend to think that is implied when we say, I have control. You do, but it's not as direct, right? You do have control over what you see, and when you see it, it's just not as direct, okay? So before we're gonna call something interactive media, we have to, number one, see that it is between a human and a computer program, right? It has to be mediated. Number two, it has to have a simultaneous or nearly simultaneous interaction. And third, the audience, the receiver of those messages, have to be in control, at least to some degree, about what they're seeing and about when they see it. The way we engage with interactive media is through a medium, well, not really a medium, but through a tool called user interface, or UI. And the user interface that we use plays a significant role, again, in how we use the media and how we actually experience interactive media, right? One example of a user interface is just a keyboard, right? Just a simple keyboard. These days, Twitter, you can just about do anything you want to do with any other social media. But back in the good old days, right, that's all it was text, right? It was just text. So the only interface you had was your keyboard, right? If you wanted to interact, you had to go through your keyboard on your phone. Typing was the only option you had. Another user interface you have is a mouse. Right? This is a classic example of a user interface. I realize that most social media is done on cell phones, but you can engage social media on a computer. And again, like YouTube, right? YouTube was designed to be utilized on a computer, not on a phone, as opposed to, again, like TikTok or Instagram, which were designed to be mobile phone friendly, designed to be used primarily on a mobile phone. Using a mouse is an important step forward in the user interface capabilities, because it eliminates a lot of other problems you have when you are just using your finger, right, for scrolling, et cetera, et cetera. You could use a touch screen. Again, your generation is, you're phone native. You guys do almost everything on a phone anymore. That's one of the arguments I have a lot with my colleagues is your generation digital native, or are you app native? The digital native idea is that your generation was raised with technology. You pick up technology so much quicker because it's normalized for you from an early age. And that model was good for a few years, but I would argue that now you're more an app native generation, meaning that you guys don't know how to use a computer. You know how to use a phone. You know how to use a tablet. In the year 2020, it's absolutely amazing to me how many of my students don't know how to attach a Word document to an email, because it's not something you do on a phone, right? They can navigate apps really easily. They can pick up and learn new things with that kind of an interface, but computer-based interfaces, they got nothing, right? Well, now you can use a touchscreen on a computer as well. In fact, my daughter uses a touchscreen computer for her schoolwork. That interface changes the dynamic of how you engage. It not only is a convenience thing, but it also changes how you approach the engagement, how you approach the interaction. And of course, probably the most important interface that you deal with is what we call a graphic user interface, or a GUI for short, GUI, GUI. This is what the GUI is what made Bill Gates rich, plain and simple. The GUI is the reason why Windows, created billions of dollars in revenue over the last several years. It's because really what Bill Gates did was he took this old the way that computers used to run is through a DOS interface, right? You had to type in commands. You had to remember commands and type them in perfectly, and the computer would only bring up what you typed in. Well, Bill Gates basically stole an idea from Xerox, the copying machine company, that if you just put an icon, like a picture on the screen that represented this program or this action or this function, that's going to be a lot easier for people to navigate and a lot easier for people to pick up than having to learn code. And it absolutely worked, right? It absolutely worked. Most people today have zero idea how to run a command prompt. Well, 30 years ago, that was the only way you could use a computer, is by running command prompts. With Windows and Apple iOS, they developed the graphic user interface, the idea that you can click on this icon and that will open the program for you, or that will execute the command for you. Now it's not scary, right? It's not that scary to figure out how to use my computer because, well, I can read and I can see the logo and I know exactly what I want. The graphic user interface is the basis for all interactive media now. Very, 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 very few people. In fact, it's a specialization now to learn how to run command prompts, learn how to run code. Whereas it used to be just a basic understanding. Like if you wanted to use computers, if you wanted to use digital media at all, you had to know command code. And now nobody does. Now you got to go to school for 6 years and get paid a ton of money when you get out if you know command code, if you know coding. So the graphic user interface, it cannot be understated how significant it was, and the spread of interactive media, right? My 75-year-old mother can use interactive media because of the graphic user interface, right? If it wasn't for that, there's no way in hell my kids could do it. There's no way in hell my mom could do it. Think of how many people would just be completely shut out of engaging with interactive media if they had to learn command prompts, if they had to learn coding, right? The graphic user interface simplified it and made it more of a user-friendly experience. Some key terms when we're talking about interactive media, and these are terms that you may have encountered, may have come across at some point in your usage of interactive media, but always just thought it just had to be there, didn't know what it actually meant, what it was. One is TCP, or Transmission Control Protocol. Transmission Control Protocol is what allows my computer to talk to your computer, right? It's a set of rules, right? It's a set of boundaries for how signals are going to be sent and received. It's controlling, right? It's a protocol, which means it's rules for the control of the transmission, right? So just break it down, right? Transmission Control Protocol, it's rules for controlling transmissions. This is why my computer can interact with any other computer on the planet. Why my phone can interact with any other phone on the planet is because they're all agreeing. Even though if I'm running Mac or I'm running Windows or I'm running Android or I'm running iOS, they're all going to operate within the same TCP because that is the universal context, the universal syntax for how electronic media, how digital media interact with each other. The next key term is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP. You might recognize this because it's at the beginning of every website, right? You want to go to a website, you got to type in the HTTP : whatever. Well, Hypertext Transfer Protocol is how links work, right? Hypertext is where I embed links into text, right? Hypertext. So the Hypertext Transfer Protocol is what allows me to move from one page to another, no matter what computer I'm working from, no matter what operating system I'm using, no matter what machine I'm using. HTTP is what allows the navigation within that system. Okay. So TCP is the overarching kind of boundaries of all electronic engagement. HTTP is how do I navigate within that system. HTML, or hypertext markup language, is the actual coding, the actual language that we use to tell the computer program, do this, do that. Computers don't speak English. They don't speak Chinese. They don't speak Spanish. They speak HTML. At least when it comes to interactive, right? When it comes to online interaction, they all speak HTML. It's a universal language that allows, again, any computer, any phone, any device to say, oh, okay, that's what you want to do. HTML translates your wishes into something that the program can understand, right? This is one of the biggest frustrations of my life, having a 75-year-old mother, is that I'm tech support for everything, right? I'm tech support for everything. I spent 2 hours on the phone with this woman on Sunday because she bought a new printer and couldn't figure out how to set up her new printer, right? Because my 75-year-old mother thinks that she should be able to just tell the computer whatever she wants and it'll figure out what she wants to do. And I have spent a lifetime trying to explain computers only know what they're programmed to know, right? You do this with your, researching a paper, researching something for a school project, right? You can't just go into Google and type, marijuana legal. You're not going to find what you're really looking for. That's just way too broad. You need to know the specific phrasing to use to get the data that you want, right? Well, HTML is the same concept here. Is I can't go to a command interface and just say, what's the temperature in Boise, Idaho? I need to know the exact language the computer uses to search for that information. And HTML is what allows that to occur. I use my graphic user interface. I use my keyboard to interface, to interact with program, and it translates that to HTML, which then goes out to the rest of the internet world, goes out to the rest of the digital world to find that data in HTML and then retranslates it back into something I can see and I can understand. If you go to any website, right, any website, you can pull up the HTML language using your browser, right? In Google, there's a real simple, I think it's like F5, right? If you're using Google Chrome, and it'll pull up all of the HTML, and you're like, what the fuck? Is this just a bunch of random words and letters, and I don't know what's happening? That's computer language. That's HTML. And, not trying to give you guys career advice or anything, but learn it. If you can learn HTML, and if you can learn a lot of the other programming languages that exist out there, holy shit, can you make some money? Oh my God, can you make some money? I have a former student, a buddy of mine now, but he was on the debate team for me and went to school because he wanted to be a music producer, right? He wanted to major in music, but very quickly realized, wow, I will never make a living. So he transitioned to programming, right? And he now works for ExxonMobil as a coder, right? All he does is write and rewrite code for ExxonMobil. And he is getting paid. He's doing really well for himself because he knows how to speak this language. That's really all it is he knows how to speak this language. So again, career advice, but I don't know why you would take career advice from me. I work in Highland. What the hell do I know about a happy life? The next key term is bandwidth. Bandwidth. Adam, don't say anything to your mom. Don't tell your mom I just made fun of Highland. Bandwidth. If you've ever done a network check on your computer, right, where You can see how many megs of upload and download speed you have, right? That's bandwidth, right? The basic premise of bandwidth is the way that I found kind of is usually most helpful in describing it is thinking of it as like a straw, right? If you have a very large straw, you can bring a lot of substance through that straw at the same time. If you have a very thin straw, you can only bring a very little amount of substance at one given time, right? Like a coffee stirrer versus a, boba tea, right? Kind of a concept. Trent, you should know all about this since you work at Starbucks, but refuse to give anybody free coffee, even though you work at Starbucks, and you could totally do it. So bandwidth is like a straw. Where the more bandwidth you have, the more data you can pull through at one given time, right? So if if in your household you have 7 people all trying to stream 4K content at the same time, you need a big bandwidth, right? You need a large bandwidth because that's a lot of data coming through at the same time. If you have a small bandwidth, you can still stream 4K video, but you better make sure nothing else is using your connection at the same time, right? The college, right, has a very large bandwidth. We need a large bandwidth because, think about it, not right now, nobody's there, but in a normal year, think about how many people are all on campus at the same time using our internet connection, downloading and uploading data, right? It's ginormous, right? It's huge. So the higher the bandwidth you have, the easier it is to have multiple users not losing service, not having a interruption. It's for more users to do something at the same time. That's what bandwidth is for, multiple users. Broadband is another key term. Broadband has to do with how many bandwidths are available at a given time to a network, right? So broadband internet is what you hear this most, right? You hear broadband internet. If you live in Freeport, you have easy access to broadband internet. If you live in McConnell, you do not have easy access to broadband internet. A buddy of mine just bought a house in Beloit, which, poor bastard. But where he lives in Beloit, it's like on the outskirts of Beloit, Wisconsin. And where he lives, he cannot get broadband internet. Just the service doesn't exist. They haven't run lines there. So the only internet capability he has is cellular. So he can only use a cellular speed connection in his entire home, right? Broadband is the idea that if I'm using 7 devices in my own home and my neighbor is using 7 devices in their home and my other neighbor is using 4 devices in their home, our usage isn't going to affect each other, right? We have a broad range of bandwidth coming into our entire area, right? So, this was a very real problem just a few years ago where there were peak data periods where if during 3 to 5 p.m. you were trying to stream something, you were screwed. Because 3 to 5 p.m. is when all these kids were getting home and they were trying to stream stuff. And so everybody on your network, right, we're all trying to get, use the internet at the same time, use the bandwidth at the same time, the broadband at the same time, and it really bogged things down. They've largely fixed that problem today, but it's kind of seen on that smaller scale when you look at how quickly does something load when you're using your cell phone signal versus how quickly does something load when you're on Highland's Wi-Fi network, right? That's the point of broadband is, whereas bandwidth is concerned with, does your household have a lot of users? Broadband is concerned with how many does the network have? How many users does the network have? Peer-to-peer or P2P is another really big idea that's becoming popular once again. Napster was kind of groundbreaking because it was a peer-to-peer file sharing network. Peer-to-peer is where I'm directly communicating and interacting and sharing from your system, right? It's me to you. Yes, mediated, but it's not going into a larger kind of system, right? Where is the data stored is really the point of peer-to-peer. Is the data stored on a large server that anyone can access? Or is the data stored on your computer that only I or a couple other people can access? You know, again, Napster allowed me to access your computer's files in a peer-to-peer system. YouTube is not that, right? YouTube doesn't work. Like when you watch a video on YouTube, you're not watching somebody's video that they have on their computer, right? It's been uploaded to a central storage area. It's been uploaded to a central server, and you're watching it from there. So peer-to-peer is becoming popular again because of social media, right? I don't want my Snapchat messages going to a central storage server, right? I don't want that because they're not for public consumption. When I send a Snapchat to somebody, it's to one person. It's to that person. It's a directed message. I don't want it going to somewhere where somebody else could pull it up, right? And so that's why peer-to-peer is becoming more important, is because privacy. The more we're mediating our communication, the more our interactions are based on communicating with an app that then communicates with another person, the more and more we worry about privacy. And peer-to-peer allows us to protect more of our privacy. The last term is what we call swarming. Swarming is what allows you to watch YouTube and Netflix, for the most part, with less lag than when you're just, you know, Skyping with somebody, right? YouTube figured this out a long time ago, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Changed the way that we view interactive media, changed the way we view streaming in general. What swarming is like, for example, like when you watch Netflix or YouTube, right? YouTube figured out that if they take this video file and they save it on 7 or 8 different storage servers, then when you go to watch it, when you go to play it, instead of pulling from one server, from one place, right, where you have, you know, things could go wrong. There could be an interruption to that server. There could be a lot of bog down on that server. If there's on 7 or 8 different ones, then if one is getting slowed down, it just switches over to the other one seamlessly, right? So when you upload a file to YouTube, it's actually being stored in redundancies, right? There's multiple copies of it stored on YouTube servers, so that when somebody goes to watch it back, that data can be swarmed in, right? So it's coming from all these different areas, all these different places, to ensure that you're getting a consistent stream, a consistent view of that video, of that material. Okay. Again, when YouTube figured this out, it completely changed the game, right? Now, yeah, that's exactly how Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, that's exactly how they do it. But that swarming provides a significant opportunity to change the way interactive media works, because again, like the graphical user interface, if it's difficult or if it's annoying, people are less likely to use it, right? So if I want people to use my product, if I want people to engage, I need to make it easy and I need to make it enjoyable. And there's nothing enjoyable about buffering, right? There's nothing enjoyable about having to stop a video every 13 seconds to let your internet catch up, right? So even with a low bandwidth, right? Even with a slower internet connection, you're still able to stream easier because of swarming, because of how that process works. All right, I said a lot of really technical shit for the last 30 minutes, so I'm going to give you guys a moment to either A, catch your breath, or B, ask a question. And we've caught our breath. All right, we'll move on. The next big thing in interactive media is going to be VR and AR. Some of you might have already experienced VR and AR. This is going to be where we go from henceforward. This is going to be a huge focus in interactive media in the future. Well, what is that? Well, VR stands for virtual reality, whereas AR stands for augmented reality. Virtual reality is where I am completely fabricating, making up, creating what I'm seeing around me, right? When you put on an Oculus headset, right, you're not seeing the room around you. You're only seeing the computer program, right? You're only seeing this fictional, made-up reality. The beauty of VR is that it's immersive. It uses a lot of motion-based engagement, right? So like if I turn my head to the left, right, like I'm seeing a different view of things than if I'm looking to the right, right? Virtual reality recreates, it creates an entirely original, different world. Augmented reality is where the computer interface is simply changing the real world around me. So in VR, I'm, on a spaceship on my way to Mars. In AR, I'm, in my living room, but fighting zombies, right? There's a camera that is showing me the world in front of me that is interacting with a computer program that I'm seeing, right? A couple of years ago, Google came out with a product called Google Glass, and they beta tested it, and it unfortunately didn't really take off. I still, to this day, really desperately want Google Glass. But what Google Glass was an AR system where it looked like glasses. You put it on, and there was a small camera in the middle, and so it was capturing the world around you. But you could bring up any data you wanted on your glasses, right? That only you could see. Only you could see it, right? So you could look at a person and it would tell you who they are based on their social media presence, right? You could look at an object and it would do an automatic image search to tell you what that object was, right? Like if you've ever seen Iron Man, right? Iron Man is and when they show Tony Stark in the suit, right? That's AR, right? He's seeing the real world, but it's also being augmented. It's being changed. It's being altered by the computer program that's running in his suit.
How come they discontinued the Google Glass? Like, how come they never went through it?
People kind of went freaky about it, to be honest. A lot of people got freaked out by the tech ethics of it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Black Mirror on Netflix, but you fucking should. It's so good. I mean, the whole show is about the ethics of technology and how do we change our behaviors based on the technologies we use. And so a lot of people got concerned with, like, if Google Glass allows me to walk down the street and use facial recognition software to immediately know who it is that's walking towards me, it's kind of creepy, right? And that could be used in very harmful ways. There's a lot of stalker going on there. Right? There's a lot of stalker options with Google Glass. And I think that's why there was a little bit of a backlash to it. There were obviously technological problems. There were obviously kinks to be worked out with the actual tech side of it, but that's why they beta test. That's always going to happen. But there were a lot of ethical concerns, and I think that's what really slowed it down. Adam is asking if I have a favorite Black Mirror episode. God, I really like the one. I don't remember any of the actors' names, but the guy is in the middle of a field, right, on a cell phone, and he's being told what he has to do. And he's basically being blackmailed. I don't know. I really like that one. I like that one a lot. Anyway, there's a lot. There's a lot of really good episodes of Black Mirror that you guys should all absolutely watch because they're amazing and they'll screw with your head and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, you know, VR and AR are where a lot of energy and time is going to be dedicated in the near future to research and development. You know, you guys may have noticed when we meet face to face, I record class using a virtual reality camera, using a VR camera, so that when you watch it back on YouTube, you can click and scroll and see the whole room. Actually, I have a meeting tomorrow where we're going to discuss using the VR cameras to do a virtual tour of Highland so that anybody could go onto YouTube and watch this video of, you know, like instead of like where I'm pointing a camera at this little space and you could only see this space, you can see the whole room just clicking and scrolling, right? If you put on a VR headset, you know, you have to scroll, you just move your head, right? And you can, it's like you're there. It recreates the idea of you being there. So again, a lot of research and development, a lot of funds, a lot of time are going into how do we use virtual reality and augmented reality moving forward. Imagine, and this is just me, but like the biggest thing, like I would love about augmented reality is sports, right? Imagine going to a game, right? Football, basketball, hockey, baseball, whatever. And you put on your AR glasses, you put on your Google Glass. And while you're watching the game, their stats can be up, right? Or replays can be shown in your glasses. And you can pull them up yourself through voice commands, right? You can use, that was one of the things about Google Glass is you know, like everybody, you know, not everybody, but you know, most people have a Google, you know, Google Home or an Alexa or something like that in their house. You could use voice commands to tell your Google Glass what you wanted to see in real time, right? Again, are there ethical concerns with that? Fuck yeah, there are. But there's also really cool opportunities with something like AR. I would love to teach in an AR environment. That would be so fucking fun, right? If like while we're in class, yes, several of you would use your AR to do other shit, to be distracted, right? You'd be watching YouTube videos in class and that whatever. But the ability for me to be able to, in class, you know, like we were talking about Trip to the Moon, right? Where I could say to you, okay, pull up this clip right now. And you could be watching it while we're talking about it in class, right? Not interfering with anybody else. You would have your own experience watching the videos of the Lumiere brothers while we're talking about the Lumiere brothers. You know, I'm a big fan of the Albert Einstein quote, never memorize something you can easily look up. Imagine if we're in class, we're talking about a subject and you want to know more about it, you can pull it up instantaneously while never losing your focus on the class itself. Without being that distraction of looking at your phone. It's right there in front of you. You can have the data in front of you while you're having the conversation. I think it's fucking cool. I love the opportunities there. But again, there are serious ethical concerns, serious privacy concerns. But I don't know. I'm really excited for this in the future. I think it's gonna be badass. I got a Oculus Quest. I love it. It's so fun. I'm a huge fan of it. You do get a little bit of a headache after a while, but I think it's cool as shit. All right. One of the most important concepts that we deal with in talking about interactive media is something called the 30-year rule, right? And the 30-year rule is just this idea that scholars, academics, whatever you want to call them, came up with, that they looked at history and said, this seems to be the pattern of how technology is incorporated into a society. the basic premise here is that it takes 30 years for a technology to really be embraced, by a society, right? It takes 30 years before a technology is fully integrated into a society, right? And they go a little bit further. They break it down by 10-year increments, right? In the first 10 years, there's an excitement about the product, there's a puzzlement about the product, and there's very minimal market penetration, right? So think about, again, like Google Glass. All right, let's look at the example of Google Glass. When it first came out, you had some people who were really excited about what this offers. But you also had a lot of like, what the hell does this even do? I don't get it. I don't understand what the point of this thing is. And as a result, there's very little market penetration. There's not a lot of use. The first 10 years of any new technology, there's just kind of mix of like, wow, this is amazing. And wait, what? What is, it's not a media technology, but the Segway, right? The hoverboard. Some people think it's the coolest thing that's ever come out. Some people think it's just, they don't understand it. They don't get it. And as a result, you don't see them everywhere, right? You see them a lot of places, but you don't see them everywhere. In the second 10 years, you get this period of flux, right? Meaning there's a lot of change going on. There's a lot of up in the airness to it, right? So, the excitement has faded out. People aren't as like, ooh, shiny new toy about this thing. But they're also not as weirded out by it, and they're not as confused by it. The product becomes more normalized, but not more adopted, right? There are more people using this new product, but it's not quite as ubiquitous, right? It's not universal. It's not something that everybody has. In the third 10 years, that's when you finally get normalization. That's when you finally get it, just everybody has one, right? It's just a normal part of everyday life. For me, this is, smartphones are a perfect example of this. And again, I age difference thing here, but like for you guys, smartphones have pretty much always been around. But back in my day, they were a newfangled invention. The first version of a smartphone, right, was actually put out in the 80s, believe it or not. Right? In the late 1980s was when Apple introduced a product called the Newton, which was, don't get me wrong, nowhere near what an iPhone is, but the premise of an iPhone was a Newton. And in those first 10 years, you had some people who were absolutely over the moon with this opportunity, with this possibility. But you had a lot more people going, I don't get it. I don't get it. Right? Cell phones existed, but they were really, 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 really uncommon. If you had a cell phone, you were in a very unique group of people, and it was probably this big, ugly bag phone, and it only worked for 2 minutes, and it had shitty reception, and it weighed 38 pounds, and right. There were cell phones and there were tablets in the 80s, but nobody had them. You go to the next 10 years, and all of a sudden, wow, right? Lots more people have Palm Pilots, right? Lots more people have, Nokia brick phones, right? Or flip phones. In the next 10 years, you're seeing more and more market penetration. More and more people have cell phones, and more people have personal assistant, digital assistants. They have these personal digital devices, right? And the third 10 years is where you see everybody has a smartphone. To the point where now, if you meet somebody who doesn't have a smartphone, you wonder what's wrong with them, right? That's normalization. Everybody has a smartphone. And one of our faculty members still has a flip phone, and every time he gets it out, I just kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I don't know if he's like trying to make a point of it, or he just is just not interested, or I don't know, but like he still uses a flip phone, and every time he gets it out, I think like, who hurt you? What are you doing? You still have a flip phone, right? That's true normalization. It became so ingrained in us that to not have one is the weird thing. Whereas I remember having a smartphone was weird. Hell, I remember having a cell phone was weird, right? I remember when it was still weird to even have a cell phone. And now it's the norm, right? It's absolutely the norm, but it takes time. Right? And I think the 30-year rule is important, not only to kind of understand as new technologies come out, you know, like what's the timeline going to look like for these things, but also it's a good kind of explanation of American society, right? We don't like new things. New things scare us. New things are weird to us. You get some people who really like it, some people who are always looking forward, but as a society, we really are slow to grow. We're slow to welcome new ideas and new elements. And I think that's probably the most important lesson from the 30-year rule is what it teaches us about our own society of, I mean, think about how much good is done because we have access to smartphones. Think about how much of your day is bettered or improved upon by that device. And think about how long it took people to get on board with that. How much more could we have done if we were faster to acceptance? Right? How much farther along could we be if we were faster to accept and embrace these new ideas and these new technologies? So again, the 30-year rule is interesting on a technological side. It's interesting from a media side. But like we're going to be doing a lot more in this class in the units moving forward, I think it's also really beneficial to look at it from a societal aspect, a sociological aspect, and how the 30-year rule can really teach us quite a bit about our American culture and our American society. It is 10:48. No point going on to the next slide because I'll just get yelled at. So any questions? I don't know why I'm doing that. Okay. Well, like I said, pretty good chance we'll be on Zoom again on Friday, but I'm still waiting for some things to shake out before I figure out if that's the case or not. So as soon as I know, as soon as I can confirm, I will let you guys know if we are on Zoom or face-to-face. Yeah. So in the meanwhile, video production, we're definitely face-to-face tomorrow, Adam. Yeah, definitely face-to-face tomorrow. Also, this is just for Adam. No, you guys, the rest of you guys aren't cool enough for this, but Adam, IT said that they sent out the Adobe licensing information to your Highland email. So check your Highland email, and they should have instructions in there for how to get it. Okay, good. All right, cool. So for everybody else, I'll see you Friday. Whether it's on Zoom or face-to-face is yet to be determined, but I will see you on Friday. Cool. Cool. Okay, bye. I'll miss you. What app do you need to use? Like for like, are you talking about like for your graphics? For your graphics, it's Photoshop. Yeah, for your graphics, use Photoshop. Save it as a PNG, right? Save it as a PNG. All right. Catch you on the flip side.